right, and welcome to Fast Break Breakfast, NBA podcast. My name is Keith Parrish. I've got friend of the show, Caitlin Cooper, coming up in just a minute. Caitlin, of course, is one of the smartest people covering the NBA. We talk about Team USA, who barely survived an exhibition on Sunday against Germany. We also talk about her Indiana Pacers, who I think are one of the more interesting and most slept-on teams in the NBA. Before I get to Caitlin, just a little bit of news. The New York Knicks are suing the Toronto Raptors. Not over Andrea Bargnani, not over Landry Fields, but over an assistant coach named Ikechukwu Azatam. I hope I'm saying his name right. But Azatam is being sued along with the Raptors and a bunch of other people for allegedly stealing proprietary materials and a login to Synergy and providing those to the Raptors. The Knicks are claiming the Raptors and new head coach Darko Rajakovic, who was the assistant coach for the Grizzlies last year, they're accusing them of recruiting Azatam and getting him to provide them with information about the Knicks to help form their coaching staff. Here is a direct quote from the lawsuit. To assist this novice coach in doing his job, defendant Rajakovic and the other Raptors defendants conspired to use Azatam's position as a current Knicks insider to funnel proprietary information to the Raptors to help them organize, plan, and structure the new coaching staff and video operations staff. They called Darko novice. I don't know where this is going. I don't know where the Violating Trade Secrets Act falls in the NBA scandal hierarchy, but the Raptors and Knicks division rivalry is heating up. Also, speaking of investigations, the NBA is looking into James Harden's comments from China, where he called Daryl Morey a liar. The Athletic is reporting that Harden told the league that Daryl Morey promised him that if James opted into his contract, Morey would trade him quickly. Of course, the Sixers have now publicly come out and said they are not intending to trade James Harden. They wanted a report for training camp. So the NBA looked into these comments. I imagine they wanted to find out when James said that Morey was a liar, what exactly did he promise you? Is it something impermissible? Something under the table? Was it tampering? But James apparently said that no, they just said they were going to trade me if I opted in, and that hasn't happened yet. So much intrigue in this league. Anyways, a couple of announcements later in this week is the return of John Burr. John will be back with me for an episode that comes out on Thursday. And then on Friday, John and I are recording a bonus episode for our Patreon supporters. That will be a live video episode where you can join us at 10:30 a.m. Central Time on Friday. We will be recording the Millennial Brunch $500 croissant bonus episode where we answer listener questions. That episode is only available to people who support us at patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. Just $1 gets you in. Also, if you're a Patreon supporter, you have the option of playing fantasy football with me. Our fantasy football signups are going on right now. Also, if you want to play fantasy basketball with me and other listeners, or if you want to join our Slack channel, you get all of that at patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. So support the creation of this show. Play fantasy football, play fantasy basketball, join the Slack channel, get a bonus episode. Patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. All right, now let's talk with Caitlin Cooper. Joined right now by Caitlin Cooper, Tyrese Haliburton's favorite blogger. Caitlin Cooper, how's it going?
I'm doing well. I don't know if I'm his favorite blogger, but I'm happy to be a blogger that's still employed and is back on this podcast.
There you go. It's been a little bit since you've been on this show. I don't think anyone's going to argue with you. I mean, I don't think Haliburton's going to listen to this one. Maybe he will. I bet if you retweet this, maybe we have a chance.
We do follow each other. It's possible.
Dude, that's great. The NBA player mutual. I don't care that, like, all right, I'm not above it. Like, I'm not like too cool to be like, oh, listen, I'm a professional podcaster. I've been doing this for years. I've had many interactions. No, man. When like a player follows me back, I'm like, that's awesome. can't believe whoever's running this person's account thought it was a good idea to follow me. Caitlin, so you know the drill. It's been a long time. Let's start with breakfast, and then we'll get to Team USA. Then we'll get to your Indiana Pacers. You have your own corner. Like we do the breakfast thing, but like you have your own corner of one Pop-Tarts, also your Outshine juice bars. And so did I say that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Outshine fruit bars.
Okay, good. So, has your breakfast been one of those things or have you branched out?
Actually, I don't know if you've seen this, but part of my new movement on Patreon is I make mailbag videos wherein I either taste test popsicles. I go to independent restaurants in Indiana and try popsicles. So this morning I didn't have time to eat breakfast, but in preparation for this monthly project that I do, I did make a popsicle that I'm going to be eating very soon. It has to do with Team USA. It's a Team USA themed popsicle.
So how does a popsicle become Team USA themed outside of red, white, and blue color? What are my flavors here?
It's red, white, and blue color.
But what do I like? What's the red? What's making up the white? What's making? We're talking like blueberries, coconut. What?
I mean, this is going to be behind a paywall, Keith, and you just want
you
me
can
dropping
tease us.
the recipe?
No, you don't have to give me a recipe. Is it just a mystery? It's gonna be mystery red, mystery white, mystery blue.
I can give away the red as from behind the paywall. It will be cranberry. I can tease that much.
Wow.
Cranberries are involved.
Cranberry, mayonnaise, and I'm trying to think what's the worst blue you could get. Anyways, that's what patreon.com/basketball she wrote for anyone who wants to see Caitlin experiment with popsicles. And the best. I mean, so you're going into restaurants. Is this a real Guy Fieri diners, drive-ins, and dives?
Yes, I've been to 3. I do mailbags. I answer the mailbag questions about the Pacers in the car and at the restaurant. And I've been to Nicey Treat in Indy. I've been to a place called Fresitas in Frankton. And what was the most recent one? I went to another one. I can't even think of it.
Yeah, this is a great idea, and I've been slacking. So that's something I should do at my Patreon. Go into restaurants. I feel like we briefly messed around with this several years ago. My compatriots were doing that, but they tailed off a little bit on that. Anyways, let's talk about Team USA. You've been watching. Did you watch all the exhibitions?
I did. I've watched all 5.
Yeah. You got a little skin in the game with Haliburton playing. What have been your impressions so far? We have 5 exhibitions down. The World Cup starts on Saturday. The Team USA is 5-0, but the 2 times they played a team that was supposed to be pretty good or okay, the game was pretty close.
Yeah, I mean, I would have liked to see Luka play with Slovenia and see that matchup a little bit more even keeled. But I mean, the German game was the most informative one. And I felt like, really, I think the thing that stood out to me the most is, I mean, I tweeted at the time that when Tyrese and Austin Reeves were playing at the end of the third quarter, they really changed the offense. Tyrese made 3 threes. The ball was moving more freely. They were getting a little bit more flow. But I think that the most thing that stood out to me from that game was the end of the fourth quarter and the fact that, like, Anthony Edwards played the entire fourth quarter. Played all 10 minutes, made those 2 big threes to tie the game at 86, but also he was defending Franz Wagner for that entire frame. So to see him doing that and putting kind of the team on his back, to quote a cliche, and the way that he was getting points stood out. But like, you know, just defensively as a unit, that group that Steve Kerr went to, where it was Austin Reeves and Tyrese and I believe Mikal Bridges, Anthony Edwards, and Jaren Jackson. Like, Jaren Jackson is switching out, as we see him do a lot in the NBA, to stop Dennis Schroeder. Schroeder was really ripping them up in the first half. We see, like I said, Anthony Edwards defending Franz Wagner. Mikal Bridges was at the point of attack against Schroeder. And then even Tyrese, like, a lot of times the Pacers and in Team USA's case, like, they're not putting him at the point of attack because his screen navigation just isn't really going to hold up. So like, he was defending for possessions against Daniel Tice over those final 3 minutes, and he was actually swimming the post, boxing out. Like, that's not something you normally see with the Pacers. So I thought the fact that they held Germany to, I think, only 5 points over the last 5.5 minutes was kind of my major takeaway from that game.
Yeah, so if you guys out there didn't catch all of this game, Team USA, I believe they were down by 16 in the third quarter. In the fourth quarter, so when they were down 16, that's when Haliburton hit some threes, cut into that lead. And then Germany was basically up like 8 or 9 points for most of the fourth quarter until, I guess, the first half of the fourth quarter. And then Team USA went on an 18-0 run to go from down 9 to up 9. They put it away. Some thought that I had, or like I've heard this and I've thought about it when I was watching the game, like Germany let off the gas. And sometimes I feel like in exhibitions, like European squads just do that on purpose, where they're like, we don't care. We don't want to show Team USA our final finishing move. I don't know if that's all that the comeback was. Also, Germany was playing on the second night of a back-to-back, so maybe they were a little bit more tired. But like you said, those lineups specifically shut down Germany. They stopped being able to score. I thought it was more interesting, maybe not the Haliburton lineups, but right before then, when they didn't play a point guard at all. When
they had Bobby Portis out there.
Yeah. So like I've been weird. So I've been doing all these games on playback, and like my takeaway is like my controversial opinion is I would play Bobby Portis more, and I would just be like, let's go with a traditional front court, a 4-5 of Bobby and Jaren. But then I don't know if it was defensive reasons or whatever. Maybe it's because of how well Austin Reeves was playing. Like Austin Reeves, he was one of the team's best post defenders. It felt like in the second half, like similar to what Tyrese Haliburton was doing. Like Reeves was actually pushing guys out on the post. He was stripping the ball. He was holding his ground. And so I was impressed by that. But like, what did you make of them going no point guard? And that was kind of how they got back in it, or how that run started.
I mean, I think there was a reason why they took a timeout after Bobby Portis shot the 3 off the side of the backboard.
Bobby did hit the side of the backboard on an open corner 3.
And Germany was hunting him a little bit. Like they were trying to use flip actions and then getting back to the ball screen to get Bobby in space. And Steve Kerr after that ended up putting Haliburton back in the game. I think part of it too was as good and, of a showing that Anthony Edwards had. I think more so the possessions that I like with him was whenever he was like using his strength to overpower Dennis Schroeder and then getting to some of those kind of post fadeaway turnarounds on the baseline, but also getting him moving. So, if it's Jalen Brunson or if it's Haliburton, like using a boomerang pass to get Anthony Edwards moving on the weak side and then letting him attack downhill and get ahead of steam that way versus like kind of having him. He's not always going to make the next read. Like as many good things as he did as a scorer, he's not always going to see the passing opportunities around him. So I think that there was a reason why Steve Kerr went back to Tyrese with, Austin Reeves and Bridges and Jaren.
So Caitlin, what's a boomerang pass?
It's just a pass back. Like if like pretend Brunson has it and Anthony Edwards has a switch on the other side of the floor. If Anthony Edwards passes out of that switch to Brunson throws it back to Edwards. So then you can attack a closeout against a shifted defense. Yeah. They did that a couple times.
So in all 5 exhibitions, Brunson has been the starter. I think a lot of us thought that his game specifically seems tailored for generating maybe his own shot in half court situations and being able to be a multi-level scorer, being able to hit 3-pointers, being able to get into the paint, hit mid-rangers. Seemed like it's going to be very, very valuable. But we saw, again, him not play at the end of the game. It seemed like he was getting toast a lot on defense. Like, do you think they would shake it up as far as starting lineups? I mean, that's probably too controversial for the team. They might have to stick with what they've done once they get into group play. But I wonder if we will keep seeing maybe Haliburton being the closer. I thought for a while after the first couple games, they would go with more Brunson and Haliburton, like both on the court at the same time, because it seems like a strength for the team. But then you saw maybe the weakness of the defense, them saying, hey, we can't do this. We got to play a little bit bigger. So what are your thoughts on Brunson starting and who should be closing most games?
Yeah, I mean, for the sake of the Pacers, I like seeing little brief spurts of minutes with Brunson and Haliburton out there together. They do that sometimes at the end of the first quarter when Haliburton's coming in, like in a hybrid transitional lineup. I don't think they wanted to do it against Germany because of what you're saying, and even to the point of, you pointing out playing 2 bigs at once. Like they were just giving up so many offensive rebounds. And if you're going to have Tyrese defending up a position, it makes it harder for him to have to box out those guys, even though he did it against Tice. But as far as Brunson as the starter, I suspect that they're going to keep that lineup the same. I know Steve Kerr's mentioned that he really values, the opportunity of continuity. Because when you look at Germany, like Germany won a bronze medal at Eurobasket last summer with this exact same group, with the exact same coach. Steve Kerr, this is his first year as the head coach of Team USA. And also these guys haven't played together minus a few sets of teammates if you look at like Josh Hart and Jalen Brunson. So finding lineup continuity, I think, is pretty important. And then in like Brunson's case, I think that he just didn't close the game in that particular game because Germany was throwing so many mixed coverages. Like they were pressing, they were playing zone, they were playing man, and the ball was kind of sticking with that first unit. And that's like not completely a knock against Brunson because, as you say, like he is the second leading scorer on this team. They're going to need that throughout, their run when they get to the Philippines. But I also just think Tyrese meshes a little bit better with the guys that play off the bench. with Reeves and Banchero and Cam Johnson. Those are all guys that are going to run the floor in transition. It provides shooting around him. The ball moves a little bit better. I just think that both of those lineups are kind of crafted to fit around each of those two guys. So I think it just depends on who has it going. I mean, Reeves and Haliburton played well in that third quarter, and Steve Kerr chose to reward that and put them in the closing lineup. So I do think that's possible. I mean, overall, when you think about the point guards and the style of play that Steve Kerr runs with the Warriors and the 0.5-second mentality, that offense is going to sit a little bit better on Tyrese than it is Jalen Brunson. So I could see some nods going to Tyrese's way at the end of the games again, but I don't suspect that they'll switch up the actual lineup or rotation configuration completely.
Yeah. In that Germany game, Germany played a lot of zone, and it seems like on Team USA's defensive end, they're only, am I wrong? Are they only playing man to man? I don't feel like they've mixed up very much. What did you see, first of all, on offense, as far as the way Team USA was attacking the zone? To me, on my very limited, church league and middle school basketball knowledge, I kept being like, why is no one flashing in the middle? Like, why is no one getting in the middle of the zone?
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of the biggest problem, right? Like Jaren Jackson was kind of nailing himself to the dunker spot instead of getting up to the middle and letting them play out of it. It was a lot of like spasmodic passes around the perimeter. I think they're probably going to need to add a couple zone busters, because sometimes with that first unit, like it wasn't even necessarily the ball movement. Like they would get a couple swing passes around the perimeter, but then when they would get an advantage, it tends to be a little bit of catch and hold between like either Brunson or Brandon Ingram at times. So then they're letting the defense catch up instead of continuing to get to that next advantage. Like, not to just tout Tyrese, but sometimes Tyrese will make an extra pass in the corner, like a quick swing pass, and then that keeps the ball ahead of the defensive rotations. They weren't really putting the defense into rotation a lot and making them move beyond just making like the basic pass around the perimeter. I mean, sometimes, like, I was even thinking about it during that game when they were kind of struggling against just the basic half court zone, that, you know, sometimes Boston will put Marcus Smart in the middle of that and let him make plays. I was kind of thinking, you know, you could flash Tyrese to the middle of that as kind of their best playmaker and see if he can pass out of it a little bit better than what maybe some of the bigs on the roster could do.
Yeah, that was my thought. You're talking about like Jaren just settling down in the dunker spot and not coming up higher. Like, you don't want, I'll be real, you don't want Jaren to catch the ball at the free throw line in his zone. Like, he's bad at that. Like, he does not a good passer. That's when he gets in trouble, picking up offensive fouls. Like, I was looking at the roster and I'm like, I don't even know who I want to be in the game. Like, I thought maybe like Austin Reeves is the one guy who can flash, but like none of, like, it seemed like maybe a lack of talent on this roster as far as a person who knows how to get in the middle of a zone and play make. Like, if you say maybe put Haliburton, put one of your point guards to do it. Like, I don't think if Cam Johnson is doing that. I don't think if Mikal Bridges is doing that. Like, he's a very subpar passer. And it's just like, there's no one on the team that to me feels like a zone buster. Is there someone you feel like they maybe should have gone to in that role outside of your guy Haliburton?
I mean, it might even just, I mean, I pretty much agree with you. I mean, other than the fact that maybe Banchero in certain circumstances, he does have a little bit more creation ability than some of the other guys, but I think you might just have to incorporate a couple plays. Like, the number one that most NBA teams go to is they call it X, and they just screen the inside of the top of the zone. Like, two guys just go ahead and kind of create a hole to get down the middle. And then, like in Jaren's case, then he can just slide from the corner and maybe catch a lob because you're distorting what those matchups are. Like, just a few kind of basic things like that. But like, as in Team USA's case, like on the flip side, the only time they're running zones on baseline plays, like they'll play 1-3-1 on a baseline play with Tyrese or Brunson at the top, and then when the ball goes out beyond the free throw line, then everybody matches up and they switch right back into man. Otherwise, they're pretty much just playing man and switching.
So on the defensive end, I said, like, I think it's basically all been man to man. And also, I mean, I would say their guarding of 2-man game and pick and rolls has been very not great. Like, they were getting shredded by the Wagner brothers and Schroeder. Like, do you think they're just playing it vanilla in these exhibitions, or is their lack of defensive creativity maybe possibly going to be an issue?
I mean, I think some of it was like what you're saying. Like, it was way too much having to depend on Jaren Jackson to be making recovery blocks. Like, they were just getting dusted on the perimeter a lot. I mean, I think there was a few times where like Jalen Brunson, if it was Schroeder, I don't really know why they were funneling that middle. I think that if they would have been using him to ice it and then push that to the sideline and down to the baseline, they would have been a lot better off on some of those empty side pick and rolls instead of chasing it and squaring it up where guys were just getting beat. And then some of it too was like, kind of like a late switch situations where Banchero and Bobby Portis were letting those guys turn the corner a lot more than what was the case with Jaren when they were full out just switching out in the fourth quarter, and it looked a lot better. But like every game I watch, I just marvel at how much Jaren Jackson Jr. is having to cover up on that end of the floor a lot of the time.
Yeah, he finished with 6 blocks on Sunday, and a lot of that's like, yeah, that's good, but also like, if we didn't need him to block 6 shots, that would be great. Like it wasn't this layup after layup of guys coming in right at him. Anyways, like Team USA's group play looks pretty easy. And then of course the challenges are going to be when you get the knockout stages. Like if you end up having to play France or Germany again, or maybe Spain, shows a little bit more. That game was kind of close. But anyways, let's talk about your Indiana Pacers. They're a very interesting team, and you are a expert on them. I think my takeaway from the Pacers, I didn't see them a ton last year. I realized like, all right, like I forgot Daniel Tice was on the team. Okay. I was watching Daniel Tice on Germany, and I'm like, who does he play for? The Pacers. That doesn't seem right. But the Indiana Pacers, interesting fact to me is just like when Haliburton played, they're pretty good. Like they were 500 when Haliburton played. They were 7-19 when he did not play. And they've had an interesting and intriguing offseason, the drafting of Jarace Walker and the signing of Bruce Brown. And so I think when we think about the East, a lot of times the Pacers aren't maybe at the forefront of our mind, but like they were 500 with Haliburton last year. Like they possibly easily could be an above 500 team this year, which puts them squarely in the playoffs. So what's your impression of this team right now and their offseason?
Yeah, I mean, when Tyrese and Miles were both available last year in games, I think they played at a 44 win pace. They still had a slightly negative net rating. I think the number one goal for them, if they want to make a push and potentially get into the playoffs or make it out of the play-in tournament, which is about where I would peg them at for next year, they have to be a top 20 defense. If they can't get out of the bottom 5 defensive rung, like it's not even me.
I didn't mean to laugh. Those are modest goals.
No, I mean it doesn't even have to be that high of a goal.
Don't be bottom 10. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean what they are as a transition team and what they are offensively when Tyrese plays, like if you look at the on-off splits, like their effective field goal percentage when Tyrese plays is on pace with the Denver Nuggets. When he doesn't play, they're the Toronto Raptors. So when he's available, like you don't have to be that much better on defense to think your way through a way where they could outscore opponents by like 1 or 2 points per 100 and have a net rating in that range to put them into, a 6th or a 7th seed in the East. So yeah, I mean, I think that's why you go get Bruce Brown. I mean, obviously that's an overpay, but I think it's an okay overpay, and that, he has a team option the second year and he's just very malleable. He's as malleable as that contract's going to be. If you can put him at the point of attack, so you don't have to do that with Tyrese, that helps you defensively. Jarace Walker, his number one attribute, in my opinion, is his off-ball instincts. They had nobody really to defend at the 4 last year. They were attempting to do it with Aaron Nesmith, but so much of the time they were having to go to pretty extreme defensive tactics just to give themselves a chance to outscore other opponents. So they're having to, double team the post or going switch to blitz, or, if somebody hunts Tyrese, they have to practically go into a quasi zone where it looks like, they're having emergency help at the nail and it practically looks like a 2-3. So with all the stuff they were having to do to plug holes for how small the lineups they were attempting to play were, I think they've put themselves in a better position to at least try to get, like I said, it's not even a huge goal. Just get into the top 20.
Let's be 19. Come on, man. We can do it. What did you think of the Bruce Brown signing? Because it's an intriguing deal in the fact that it's a big 1-year overpay. Maybe they keep him next year, but it seems also possible. It's just like, hey, we got 1 year out of Bruce Brown.
No, I think like they had to spend, I believe, at least $18.5 million to get to the salary floor. So I think that that's a perfectly, good way to use that money, because like you just said, it could practically be a trade exception if they wanted to. And I do think that, he's coming from a winning culture. He just won a championship with Denver. I think he's going to be a good veteran player, and you can use him in a lot of different ways. It sounds from the Pacers' perspective that they anticipate using him more traditionally than what you would have seen like in Brooklyn when he was being used as a short roller. But I think there's even opportunities for him to do that with Tyrese. I mean, the Pacers use a lot of guard screens where they'll have a guard come up out of the corner and screen for Haliburton, where you could see, Bruce Brown slip into the basket in those types of situations. They like to mix and match who defends who, and I think that value's there as well. But in transition, like they like to say this stat a lot, but between Bruce Brown, Obi Toppin, and Tyrese Haliburton, they have the top 3 players in the NBA in transition effective field goal percentage from last season. They really want to load up on that end of the floor. They were already, 4th in transition frequency last year, and they added guys who fit to that identity and fit to the identity that Tyrese wants to play with. So,
So with that addition of Obi Toppin and Bruce Brown, like what in your mind is the starting lineup going to be? We got Haliburton, we got Miles Turner. What's the 2 through 4 in your guess?
My best estimate right now is that Benedict during the NBA Finals was on like a second stream broadcast with Stephen A. Smith and effectively revealed that he's going to be starting next year. He did start the last 8 or 10 games of the season. Buddy Hield was coming off the bench. I would anticipate that continues. If you're paying Bruce Brown $22.5 million, I don't think you're paying him to do that off the bench. And then my guess is it'll be a camp battle between Obi Toppin and Jarace Walker, but based on how they used Benedict last year as a sixth man coming off the bench in his rookie year, I wouldn't be surprised if Obi Toppin is starting at the 4 and Jarace comes off the bench.
What did you see from Jarace in Summer League? I was actually watching one of his games this morning. Looked very raw offensively, but he was making a lot of defensive plays. So what'd you think of his Summer League performance?
I think you have to take some of it with a grain of salt because a week after the fact, they revealed that he had a loose body removed from his elbow. So I think he shot like 31 or 32% on jump shots. It might have even been lower than that. I don't have that number in front of me, but I don't know how much his elbow was impacting his shot release because I do think it was his right arm. So there's that. But I also think he was just getting pressed into doing a lot of things that you're not going to see him doing with the Pacers. And that can be okay at Summer League to, let guys stretch their legs and see what else they can do. But Andrew and Ben didn't play the final 2 games, so there was quite a bit of point Jarace going on and 4 or 5 pick and rolls that I don't necessarily think you're going to see a lot of on a team that has Tyrese and Andrew Nembhard and TJ McConnell. So I don't think that he's more so like we didn't get to see some of the stuff that I would have liked to see because they had Isaiah Jackson and Toshiboy on the roster, and those two are very much going to be tethered around the basket in the dunker spot. So we didn't get to see a lot of Jarace Walker like doing screen and roll stuff potentially with Andrew Nembhard that I would like to see during the regular season. But he is kind of a utility guy. Like Miles Turner's compared him to Thad. I think there's just a lot of different ways that you can use him. And for the standpoint of having him be the low man defensively. And what I was saying earlier, like when the Pacers are playing lineups last year, where it's Aaron Nesmith and Nembhard and Tyrese Haliburton and Buddy Hield, and like Buddy Hield's supposed to rotate over and be your weak side rim protector at times. Having Jarace Walker there and his instincts where he can tag and still get out and intercept a pass, just having that size alone and his wingspan is going to be a big difference for a team that was mostly composed of 6'5" guys last year.
So are we going to put the goals for Jarace Walker to hit those arbitrary Thad Young averages, whatever it was, like the 15 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 blocks, 1 steal per 36 minutes, him and Michael Jordan, whatever that famous.
Yeah, I mean, it was like Larry Bird and Magic Johnson and Thad, I think, are the only people who've ever done this.
That's great. Going back to Mathurin. So he I feel like last year had a good summer league where everyone was like, oh, okay. And then he started off the season pretty hot. And then I saw over the final 65 games, he shot 27.9% from 3. So what were your impressions of Benedict Mathurin? What do you think he can be?
I think with Ben, it's interesting because going into the pre-draft process, I would like to correct my error in assessing him because I looked at the numbers on Synergy and saw like, oh, look, he's not shooting very well on unguarded threes, but he shoots very well on screens or on threes off of screens, which are more difficult. Like this is probably just noisy, and his 3-point percentage will likely rebound with the Pacers. And as you say, he was shooting pretty hot at the beginning of the year, but he's very much wired to catch and drive. In a spot up situation, he wants to go into his jab step to the right and put the ball on the floor with his left. Like he plays out a triple threat. So the issue with that is he started seeing shorter closeouts as the season went on because he's not making shots, but also you want to take the drive away from him. So he doesn't always shoot like in flow in rhythm where, he might double clutch before he goes and heads and lets it go. So for him, just like being more natural, just catching the ball and shooting in a rhythm. I know that sounds very basic, but I think that he can get back to, I think he's a better shooter than what he showed at the end of the year. Mm-hmm. It's just having to adjust what his natural inclination is when he catches the ball. So, but it is a thing, like the fact that this guy, I think he was like bottom 4 of the like 300 some players that drove the ball at least 5 times per game. His pass rate was like 18%. So we know that he can get to the rim. We know that he can draw help at the rim. But if you're not hitting catch and shoot threes and you can't pass out of those drives, like there's going to be a lot of incentive next year to be loading up on his drive. So one of those two things is going to have to shift for him. He's either going to have to get better at processing kick out avenues or his 3-point percentage is going to have to go back up. And the 3-point percentage is probably the lower hanging fruit between the two.
And if he can improve on those, if he can, start knocking down those 3-pointers at a normal rate and then pass the ball sometimes, Are you optimistic that like this guy still maybe has like all-star potential, or do you think maybe he's more of like a role player, 6-man, fifth starter kind of guy?
No, I mean, I don't know that I would go all the way to all-star, but I think that he would pair very well with Tyrese Haliburton in the sense that he's so good at getting downhill out of second side actions and being able to pressure the rim more so where, Tyrese plays with, more grace and finesse and his processing as a passer. So, I mean, I think the Pacers need three things from him. The two that we just mentioned, they need him to hit, catch, and shoot threes. They need him to be able to pass the ball when he gets to the rim, but also defensively. That's going to be a big hurdle for him as well, because there's just not a lot of things that you can readily pinpoint right now and be like, that's a thing that he does well on the defensive end of the floor. Like, there's a few times at the end of last season where, like, he might get switched onto Shea and he'll really dig in and he might get a stop in those situations. But off ball, he doesn't always make the quickest recognitions in scramble situations, or he'll create domino effects after switching. And then just his screen navigation in general, like if they're going to chase over, he gets snagged on picks a lot and then will force Miles to have to switch or put guys into awkward situations, and that can make it hard. Like, that's why Bruce Brown is more important, because you don't want Tyrese defending on ball. He's much better with using his off ball instincts in, like, an aerial ace roamer role, and you can't put Ben there. So you need somebody out there, whether it's Nembhard or Bruce Brown, in order to do that. But you're going to need to see growth from him on both ends of the floor. I think he's going to be guarded differently than what we saw last year. So that can always be hard for guys in their second year. But I think that the stage is set for him to be, of the guys that are returning, to be the breakout candidate, because he is the guy that's most likely to move into the starting lineup and be getting those touches and those reps. So.
Gotcha. Looking a little deeper into the roster, what are the how do you think the rotation is going to flesh out? I think there's some questions among, like, Nembhard started a lot of games last year. Still got TJ McConnell there. And then you have like the backup bigs, Isaiah Jackson, Jalen Smith. Those guys were kind of interchangeable a bit. And then Nesmith, a fourth place Hustle Award winner last year, got a lot of burn. How do you think the rotation is going to fill out?
I mean, that's the thing. Like with Andrew Nembhard, I thought he was terrific in summer league. Just his overall composure, his ability to mosey to his spots. Like, I don't know how many people know this, but like, while the offense did have its struggles, especially during the initial 10 games when Tyrese Haliburton was out with the injury, I think Andrew averaged like 13 potential assists per game when he was the starting point guard. So like, he has really good feel in the pick and roll for what he's doing there. But like, the fact of the matter is, if you're starting Tyrese and Ben and Bruce and Jarace / Obi and Miles, like, you're not starting Andrew anymore, and then you already have TJ McConnell. So like, if TJ is still going to be part of this rotation, you're not moving TJ McConnell off the ball. So that means like Andrew, who's made really good strides and went from being a second round pick to a key starter last year, might actually end up with a smaller role unless they make some type of trade with TJ at some point in time. And then like the backup big rotation carousel, like I can't see a way that they get it to the trade deadline with Isaiah, Jalen, and Daniel Tice still all on this roster and potentially like time sharing a backup 5 position. I don't think it's super tenable to be just rotating every other game between, who's your backup 5 tonight based on the matchup between Jalen and Isaiah. I think for me personally, like, they have Isaiah longer under team control because they drafted him, and they can potentially sign him to a rookie extension, versus Jalen has, I believe, a team option in a year. But like, I just think for Jarace's overall development, it makes more sense to play Jalen at the 5, because while Jalen didn't shoot the 3 well, he does at least shoot threes. Whereas Isaiah, you're basically using him as a rim runner or tying him to the dunker spot, and then that kind of limits, just your overall flexibility of what you can do with Jarace, especially if the 3 isn't falling for Jarace. So I would lean Jalen, but I don't have an inclination from the Pacers as to where they're leaning right now.
Gotcha. And with some of those names you mentioned who might not even be in the rotation, you guys have like all these salaries that are very movable, and they're very like, oh, we could make a deal here. Like Tice making $9 million, McConnell making basically $9 million. And then if it is, I don't know if you want to dangle, maybe the season isn't going great. Maybe you find yourself in 9th place as opposed to 6th place. Then you could throw in Bruce Brown, and it's like, oh, that's $45 million worth of salary right there. I mean, I don't know who you'd be shopping for, who might make that much money.
And Buddy Hield's in a contract year too. So.
Yeah, and Buddy Hield, of course, making over 20 or so, or around there, 19 or so. I forgot. His was descending. He tricked me up there on that contract. So yeah, there's a lot of things the Pacers could be doing this year. Like, can you imagine them making a bigger trade, or at least some form of like, maybe they at least bring on, I don't know what the bad salaries are out there. Is this a Gordon Hayward reunion setup, or a Gordon Hayward back to Indiana type thing? As he's also in an expiring contract with making a pretty large number.
I mean, they and Tyrese have made it fairly clear that their goal is to try to make the playoffs next season. I think that's where they're going to start out. And they've also made it clear that they tried to make some splashier trades last year. There was some, Chad Buchanan, this is me paraphrasing, had said around the draft that they explored moving number 7 for players who were on expiring contracts. I can let people think at who those players would be who are probably from a country north of here and might play for the Toronto Raptors.
Okay. Yeah.
So, I mean, the problem for them is that they indicated that, it's very risky for a small market team to be moving a number 7 pick for somebody on an expiring deal if they don't, have assurances that that person would want to stay long term. So I can't see them giving up like top tier assets to do that. But people know I certainly think that OG Anunoby would be a terrific fit on the Pacers. I think Pascal Siakam would be a terrific fit as well. But, whether you're willing to do that and bet on yourself, I don't know that they necessarily have to be on that timeline right now, but I do think eventually in order to get that second star in the door, a second all NBA player like a Pascal Siakam, they're going to have to be willing at some point in time to be like, hey, we trust enough in Tyrese Haliburton, we trust enough in ourselves to win games that we can, convince that player to stay after we've traded him. I don't know that they have to do that this summer, right after they just signed Tyrese to a 5-year max. But during that 5-year max, I think they're going to have to be willing to take a risk at some point, whereas they're usually pretty patient. And, that's worked out for them. That's how they got Tyrese. But yeah. I think that, at a certain point in time, you're going to have to be willing to take a risk.
Can you not get that Indiana Hoosier connection with Anunoby? Get him to commit to
That's what I'm saying.
The Pacers? That also feels like a very Pacers franchise type thing to do. I don't know if that's a proper assessment or not. To try to bring in the hometown guy. Let's wrap up with Pacers this year. Are they going to be better than the Bulls? Yeah, right? Aren't they?
I feel so. Like it.
They're going to be better than the Raptors?
That one is interesting. Like, I'll ask you, what would you believe in more? The Raptors to be a top 20 offense or the Pacers to be a top 20 defense?
Oh,
Which one would you have more faith in?
That's a good one. What can my guy Darko Rajakovic do as coach of the Raptors?
Hey, they have all the plays. They have all the Pacers plays. They have all the Nuggets plays.
Yeah, and they stole a bunch of Knicks plays. This is going to be great. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like they're going to be – those teams both feel like they're screaming towards being barely 500 at the end of the year. So they're on – you think – all right, we'll say they're on the same level, same tier kind of as the Raptors. What about like the Nets? You think the Pacers are better than the Nets?
I don't know what to make of Brooklyn. That's one team that I struggle with.
They were bad once they got all the cool guys that I like. Once they got Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson, they weren't actually that good, but they do feel like, I don't know. It seems like the Pacers should be actually better than the Nets. As long as there's even both teams at full health. I would think so. Is that your opinion as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I can name probably 6 to 7 teams that I definitively think are better than the Pacers right now. Like obviously Boston and Milwaukee, Philly, Miami. Who am I missing?
Cleveland, probably.
Yes, Cleveland, probably New York as well.
New York, yeah.
Yeah.
I saw Bobby Marks picked New York to make the finals out of the your Caitlin just raised her eyebrows. Those of you not watching on YouTube. I
like the Knicks. Don't yell at me, Knicks fans.
Whoa.
I think that's a good basketball team, but I'm
bold.
I'm not ready to go there. That is a bold one.
Yeah, so you guys are going to be like right now. I mean, we assume Miami will get Damian Lillard. And even if they don't, I still have more trust, I guess, as a franchise, organizational stability in the Heat. And then like maybe the Pacers are right there with the Hawks and the Raptors and the Bulls and those. It's going to be an interesting battle. And of course, having the desire to make the playoffs, I think is important when you're talking about splitting those up. Like the Bulls might be like, hey, yeah, we're done. We're pulling the plug on this season.
And the Raptors,
and the Raptors too.
Might have to trade Pascal. So
yeah. Well, Caitlin, thanks a bunch for coming back on. It's been too long since you were here, but everybody go check out Basketball She Wrote, your Patreon, and check out the experimenting with food over behind the paywall there.
There'll be a new mailbag video, a new popsicle taste test. Everybody's going to be waiting for that. Hey, we're both back to being independent. How are you liking life back in the independent realm?
Pros and cons. I
feel similarly.
Yeah. Whether or not I remain independent, we will see. I guess I got another month of this NBA season or off season to figure things out. But anyways, Caitlin, pleasure talking, and I look forward to the next time.
Thanks for having me.